Hey everybody!
Hi.
So I'm recording a mini lecture that I'm giving in class today on game design. And because one of my students isn't here, I figured I would record it to them. And because this is a personal sort of game design story, I would record it for you as well. So I'm going to sharing a mini in-class demonstration or in-class discussion about the evolution of one of my games. Now, my students already know a lot about this game, and the game is called Guppies. Guppies! And I love Guppies. Guppies, I've been working on this game for years and years and years now. So I want to kind of tell you a little bit of the story about the evolution of the game, because it's going to help you understand about how I have personally evolved some of my own sort of game design problems. Originally, I had an idea of doing a tile-based game. I love tile gaming. Carcassonne is like my favorite game, and I decided I wanted to do a tile-based game, but I didn't want to use square tiles. I wanted to use hex tiles. And originally I had this idea of making a game called Hex Connect. And I quickly sketched up a version, and I brought it to my students to play test, and within 2 minutes it was garbage. It was literally the fastest I've ever ruined a game in play test ever. Everyone was like, yeah, that doesn't work. And I'm like, oh my God. So I went and I did it again the next week, and I used geometric shapes, Hex Connect. They were basically colored triangles that you were trying to connect. And it worked really, really well, but the question was, what was the scoring system? What was the distribution of tiles? So for me, it was not about the engine, it was really about how we were going to make it, the gamification of it. So I did a nice job. I originally came up with 120 tiles that were single-sided. So you had little stacks of tiles all over the board, and everybody would play them and go around and do this. The game was pretty good. It lasted probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours, which wasn't a problem. But I always had a little nagging feeling about basically how the game was going to work overall. I had a scoring system, and the scoring system worked really, really well, but it was an abstract game. And what I've learned over the years is people don't like abstract games. They like games with stories. And Hex Connect was done, I'm not going to lie. After 2 or 3 years of play testing, of working it out, I had come up with the entire thing. Hex Connect was done. And I was driving down the street one day and I thought, I really wish Hex Connect had a story. I wish there was more of a metaphor behind it. And I was thinking about it, and all of a sudden I was thinking about fish. Heads and tails. Connecting heads and tails. And I was thinking about colors. What kind of fish have colors? And I immediately called home and said, do guppies come in multiple colors? And the answer was yes. And I don't know why guppies seemed right, but I decided I was going to name the game Guppies. So I called up one of my best students and I said, I need 3 fish. I need 3 fish to be in 3 different colors, and I want them to have 3 different body weights. So I want to have 3 different styles. And so they designed for me 3 different fish, the 3 different fish here. There are issues, by the way, about whether or not this is colorblind friendly. We can address that if that's a big priority of yours. It's not always a big priority of mine as I'm working through these things, because I was going to go with the color contrast I wanted. Immediately I've got blue, so that's going to screw me up anyway with the color blindness stuff that I'm dealing with. And when I did this, I realized that I wanted to create tiles that had both heads and tails on them, so instantly I went from single-sided tiles to double-sided tiles. That's a shift. And then my tiles were going to have heads on one side and tails on the other. That's another shift. So now I've got to come up with a new distribution of tiles, because it isn't just like blue to blue or red to red, it's head to tail. That makes a difference. I made sure that the thicknesses were set up so that it would only go orange to orange, or purple to purple, or green to green, so that you'd be matching both on color and also a little bit based on thicknesses. Ideally, it's a good design. So now I've got these double-sided tiles, and now I can't lay them on the table, so that leads to having things in a bag. So the bag is not just a delivery mechanism, the bag is part of your chance mechanic. You've got to pass the bag along on your turn. So I went through and I did an enormous amount of recalculation based on the tiles I had done with Hex Connect, and I made the Guppies tiles. By the way, it's only 4 pieces of art. It's 3 fish and a blue background. That's all I had to commission to make this. It wasn't a lot of art to design the game. Well, as I was moving forward with this, I suddenly realized I was paying for 128 tiles, but I only had 120 tiles in the bag, because I wasn't thinking about my manufacturing. So I upped to 128 tiles, and I really spent a lot of time creating a shift. Matter of fact, when you look at the tiles, so green is backed by orange, but orange isn't always backed by green. So there's like a whole thing about how the relationships are. So when you pull a tile out, you get some real choices as to what you're going to be making. So that was another evolution. So I went from having this one idea of single-sided tiles to double-sided tiles to how the fronts and the backs relate to each other, and then literally how you put them all together. Great. Play tested it, and the rules for HexConnect didn't work for Guppies, which makes no sense, by the way, but the scoring mechanism didn't feel right. So we came up with another scoring mechanism for Guppies, and that was great. Now I'm like, wait a second, I've got two games. I've got HexConnect and I've got Guppies. Is HexConnect over? And I went and realized that HexConnect isn't over. HexConnect feels right, but there was something missing with HexConnect. So we went back and we made all the HexConnect tiles double-sided. Because the idea of passing the bag feels good. The idea of having multiple choices on your turn feels good. So Guppies influence HexConnect, but we left the rules for HexConnect as they were, and that a game exists in another world, and that is a different game. And this is going to happen in your games as well. You're going to have a little bit of a modification, and you're going to think, oh, that game is now here. You're like, wait a second, maybe your game splits. Maybe an idea is so good that instead of throwing it away, you're just going to set it aside for another game and realize that one game leads to two or to the sequel. So I play tested Guppies for a very, very long time. And one of my tiles in Guppies is blank. And the joke behind the blank tile would be, is if you pulled it out, you were screwed. Ha ha, you don't get to score on your turn. And I was talking to another game designer, and they're like, man, I really love the fact that you have one tile that's unique, but instead of that being a bad moment, I want it to be a good moment. I want it to be a special moment. And I'm like, oh, he's right. I've squandered an opportunity here. So I went through and I called up my artist and I said, quickly, I need another... By the way, my artist made the graphics, but I did all the work. I did all the redesign. I spent more time in Photoshop than my artist ever did. But I turned to my artist and I said, I need another piece of art. We didn't work for... This is, by the way, the original, blue tile. I need something new. I need something special. What does it look like? Now, I hate wildcards. I hate wildcards not as a concept. I hate wildcards because most of the time they visually break your game. I've got a peanut butter and jelly game where you've got peanut butter or jelly or bread and then a card called wild. And it doesn't make the visual metaphor. So since my game can connect fish to fish or at times blue to blue, I wanted to make something that would fit inside of a blue card so that it wouldn't be broken, so that it wouldn't break my game. And I thought to myself, what would sound fun? So I immediately called up my artist and I said, I need a rainbow squid. He goes, what's a rainbow? I just, give me a rainbow squid. He's like, you know what I want. He's like, no, I don't. But immediately he came back the next day with my little rainbow squid. And I know it's an octopus and I don't care. I called a rainbow squid anyway. So he made my little rainbow octopus for me. And people are like, every tentacle, no. Tentacles, I love the way it's done because at the end of the day, it connects based on the blue. It's blue to blue. How it gets scored is special, but now when you pull this out, it's a magic moment. There's one magic moment. Now, it's got to be a game changer, but it can't be a game dominator. It's got to be worth something special, but it can't be worth something so special that it ruins the game. So I want you to think about, your game should have a magic moment, but your magic moment shouldn't be what ends the game. What if the magic moment happens at the beginning? What if the magic moment happens at the end? So this idea of timing is very much everything, but you also want to make sure that everyone has that moment that they feel special. And by the way, this is a multiplayer board game, not everyone's going to have that moment. Matter of fact, only one person gets the magic moment, and other people get to sort of, bask in their glow. This works for video games as well. When is that special item going to occur? How are they going to use that item? So that was another item that came up. So this I felt really good. This is another modification. There is no version of this in HexConnect, by the way. That's not how this works. So the game is play tested. The game works out. It always takes about 2 hours. Every time I play it with adults, It's a bottle of wine game. It looks like it'd be great for kids. It turns out it isn't. Kids can't follow the directions very well. If you just put the tiles down and say connect the dots, they don't have enough attention to detail to follow it along very well. I found it takes people that are about 14 years old to play this game. I've had 12-year-olds just not pay attention very much. But we were still missing a couple other things. And I talked to another game designer. And I want to point out, by now we're looking at probably 7 years of design, because you have like 2 or 3 years on the Next Connect and a couple years on Guppies. So I was talking to a very senior game designer, and he pointed out a couple things to me. First, he said, you have too many tiles. Now, I had been cultivating this 128 tile set for a very long time. Nobody wants to hear you need to edit, but you all need to edit. He's like, cut it in half. Give me 64 tiles. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that, because it really is a unique distribution, and there are odd numbers of certain tiles. And I was like, really, it was a devastating moment. It was probably the thing that hurt the most. It hurt the most because he was right. It hurt the most because I wanted people to play the game more than once, not to play the game once and then begrudgingly play it a second time. I wanted it to be something that you could casually play. Also, it would drastically drop the price. This is a good thing. But I'm fighting my time and investment from the output that I want people to do. Listen to that carefully. How much do you fight your own time and investment for the other people's experience? No one knows about your time and investment. It's gone. It's out there. Focus on the experience. So I sat down and I cut the tiles in half. I got down to 64. The other thing that he had said was that and by the way, the other thing that had happened was the first person never could score. The first person was laying the first tile down. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to even go one step further. I'm actually going to I'm going to take one of my tiles. I'm going to put a red dot in the middle of it. This is a sticker, by the way, but in the final version, it'll be printed. I'm going to put a red dot in front of it, and this is going to be your standard starting tile. So the game always starts with this up or down, doesn't matter which. So that now even the first person gets to score. I've removed the blindly mean-spirited part of the game. Don't get me wrong, we have plenty of games that have mean-spiritedness. There's bosses and bad guys, but the game should not be, because the world shouldn't be mean-spirited. Bad guys should be mean-spirited, opponents should be mean-spirited, but the premise shouldn't be mean-spirited. And that was a mistake I made. I like to talk about that mistake because it makes me feel good to remember I had made that mistake. So now I have this starting tile, which, by the way, meant that I took one more tile even out of my set. So I went from 120 to 128, down to 64, down to 63. That means there's only 63 turns in this game. Now, whenever you're dealing with a turn-based system, you always think about how do you balance it? How do I make sure that everybody has the same opportunity? And that brings us to the next point. When I was talking to this game designer, he's like, where is the rush of Cascade? Like, what do you mean by that? He said, well, it seems like everyone takes a turn. You go, then you go, then you go, then you go, then you go. I want to see something that allows me to go again and again and again. Something where I can go like on a run. Something that doesn't happen all the time, but one person can have this magical moment. Now, for people who are focused on Euro-style gaming, which of course means no player elimination and you don't know who wins until the end, this might seem antithetical to that. But the reality of it is, we do keep scoring this game, we keep it off to the side. But the idea being is you want to give people the opportunity to have something else. And what's great about this is that means that, yeah, I might get to play 4 tiles and you may only get to play 1, but that was my rush and that was yours. Originally, the math got pretty heavy. And nobody wants a heavy, confusing math. It's like, no, and it literally was like the number of sides connected multiplied by, and it kind of goes back to my pig and super big idea where you get to have a multiplier in there, but people don't like playing with multipliers. They really don't. You'd think they'd be able to handle multipliers, but the audience hates multipliers. They really do. And so I thought to myself, maybe everybody should have their own fish color. So you're green and I'm orange and you're purple, and on your turn, if you match your fish, you get more points than if you match the other fish on somebody else's turn. Now, this made it a little confusing because of what 2 people are playing purple. It didn't really matter, but then people were like, well, I'm purple, you can't be purple, and you ran into this issue about multiple people playing the same color. But that's what I had done. And then we play tested, and people forgot what color they were, which seems ridiculously stupid, but people couldn't remember what damn color they were. So I made it so everyone had a little meeple in front of them of the right color, but that seemed contrived. That wasn't working either. So I was like, what could I do to increase the thrill? And that's where we came up with the Guppy die. This is the Guppy die. And the Guppy die, by the way, has on it, one side has all three fish. One side has the purple fish, one side has the orange fish, one side has the green fish, and daringly enough, I left two sides blank. Which, by the way, was not just daring, it was cost effective, because you only pay for the sides you print, so these two sides are blank and whatever. So we modified the rule set one more time. Let me explain how the rule set is. So the scoring system is relatively straightforward. On your turn, you pull a tile out and you lay it down. The rules have always been that for a move to be valid, every side of the touch has to match. Head to head, proper color, or blue to blue. Everyone forgets blue to blue. From a scoring perspective, you get 1 point for blue, you get 2 points for fish. But with the die, you get a bonus. And what the bonus is as follows. If it's blue, instead of one side for 1 point for blue, you get 2 points for blue. You get an extra bonus point. And for the fish, if your color fish matches, instead of 2 points, you get 3 points. It's a bonus. So it's 2 points for blue if it's there, otherwise it's 1 point for blue, 2 points for a fish, otherwise it's 3 points for a fish. There you go. You've got a better bonus system for doing it. It's a very straightforward thing. It's basically 1, 2, 3, or it's 1, 2, or 2, 3. Great. Now, with the squid, the octopus, the scoring's a little bit different. Technically, it's blue. It's blue all the way around. So we changed the rule with this so that when you pull this out, you don't have to play it. If you don't play it, that's your turn. You say, I'm saving it for later, and that's your turn. And on any turn you want, that could be your turn, is that you get to play it. And by the way, if you roll, and then when you do it, every side that matches is 5 points. And if on your turn you roll blue, that means every side is 6 points. Here's your bonus point there as well. So you can decide strategically, when am I going to use this? And by the way, it's a bonus. It's not always a game changer, but it gives a really nice thing. So where's the cascade? Where's the cascade? So the cascade comes in as follows. If you match 3 or more sides, and that's blue, blue, blue even, which would just be 1 point, 1 point, 1 point. If you match 3 or more sides in your turn, you get to go again. And now we get conflict. Now, do I go for more points or I go for again? And we've seen people roll and go, and you just roll. Every time you pull, you roll the die again, roll the die again, roll the die again. So you can really get 3 or 4 moves on the same piece, and you can get really on a run. It doesn't have to be high scoring, but you can go on a run. Now I've got one last element that I want to mention, and that is the element of keeping things tight. Whenever you're building in Guppies, the temptation is to go for a quick move, grab the points, one side, and the table grows really, really big, but it doesn't allow for these big, tight moves. You want the table to be as tight as possible. So I added one more thing that I noticed and I play tested. And by the way, I play tested this during the pandemic on Tabletop Simulator. It's very different to play test something on Tabletop Simulator. It's a great way to find out if it works versus doing it in real life and finding out whether it feels right. And the idea is this. Since heads and tails never exist on the same side, if you were to do something side by side, like this, if an area were to emerge where you would need a head and a tail at the same time, this would be an impossible spot. So we added one more component. If on your turn you create an impossible spot, we have a bag full of little blue glass pieces. You place the piece where no piece can go, and they lose a point. This encourages you to keep the board clean. Now, you're going to lose points. It has to happen. But it also encourages one other thing. It encourages people from not falling asleep, because we want to make sure that everyone's paying attention, that everyone's making sure that the moves are valid. And now not only am I making sure that the moves are valid, but I'm watching to see if you've made a bad space on the board. Because if you made a bad space on the board, put that chip down, you lose a point. That's kind of a fun element. It's not a gotcha element because you did it to yourself, but it keeps all the players involved. And that's another item. You want to make sure that on other people's terms, they're paying attention. For those of you who are making video games, you want to make sure that people are reading your text. You want to make sure they're looking at your cutscenes. They're paying attention to your story. How do you make what's relevant to you relevant to them? You've got to put the good stuff, and you can't just force them to. Wake up, everybody. It's not enough. You've got to truly make it sure that it's there. And so now the game is much smaller. So I put all the elements in, and I want to go back to, I reduced the number of pieces. 64 pieces. I added a much simpler scoring mechanism, but with a little bit more of a wow factor every time. I added a special card. I added a cascade effect. And then I added a little bit of a gotcha. And again, by the way, putting the blue tiles, the blue stones down was not just meant to gotcha the people. But we found that when people were playtesting the game, they kept looking in the wrong direction. They kept looking in spots that you couldn't peep people in. And we figured the best thing we could do is tell people to stop looking there. Like once the stone is down, that's no longer a place for you to bother to look at. So it actually sped up the game. And when you're working on your games, when you play test, you're gonna realize that people are gonna be like looking at the wrong thing, clicking on the wrong thing. How do you discourage, without just slapping their hand, the negative behaviors that you're trying to avoid? The one thing that I never solved, and by the way, the bag is now essential. The bag is, you still need the bag. The box was optional, but man, you have to have branding. I love my box. I love that they made this wonderful graphic for me. The one thing I've never conquered is scoring. At the end of the day, I need a giant scoring mat, which of course wouldn't fit in the box. I tried a scoring mat on the back. It did not work the way I wanted to. This is not a good idea. I make mistakes. This is not a good idea. It sounded like a good idea, but it got way too tight. At the end of the day, right now, we're still pen and pencil. We're just still pen and pencil. And a lot of games work that way. And I'm not going to be the end of it. I want it to be perfectly elegant and portable, and now it's just going to be like, and you need pen and pencil. But at the end of the day, I still have Hex Connect. I still have another game somewhere else with a different rule set, different graphics, different scoring mechanism, but it's all based on the same thing. I bifurcated. And the old Guppies, this is actually Guppies, the 128 tiles of Guppies. What do I do with the old Guppies? We kind of pretended it doesn't exist. I'm not calling the new one Guppies 2. And anybody who's bought Guppies, I've had to go back and tell them, here are the new rules, here are the tiles to get rid of, I will sell you a die. Like for the people that have the old one, we're like pretending it doesn't exist, and this is the new Guppies. So I want to share with you sort of the evolution of this, because a lot of what I'm describing is not just game design, it's this personal evolution about how you respond to your own design. And also, it's about how you really stay player-centric, how you really look at all of those different emotional things. And again, I've created such what would be a good mechanic and a good scoring system, but it was level. It was level. It always felt the same at any moment. So how are you going to create these extra moments? Break the rhythm. Something special where you're going to have what are the different experiences. And by the way, part of me was like, no, it's too many outliers. It's the outliers that make the game special. And now you can't make them outliers. You have to integrate those outliers to be the peaks and valleys of your game. So there's the peak, the one-time peak of this, the frequency peak of this, the less frequently peak of the cascade. So all that kind of comes together. And then, of course, there's the negative. There's the valley of, oh, you made a spot, and everyone gets to participate in that. All right. That's my story. I know I didn't actually show you Guppies, but, I really want to tell you about the evolution of how a game is made. I want you to start thinking about the highs and lows of your game, how you create the special things, and to separate your own experience as a designer from the experience that you're making for the players. My name's Jared. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and do something special for your own game.